Back on K-News Saturday morning on K-News 94.3 and 94.3knews.com. I'm Paul Cashin, and we continue in our series of interviews of getting to know the candidates for the office for mayor in Palm Springs. And joining me right now, one of those candidates, Michael Birnberg. Michael, thank you very much for joining us. And why the heck does anyone want to be mayor of Palm Springs?
Thank you for having me. That is a common question. Many people I know that I feel are qualified for the position are not running because they do not think it's worth it. I think it takes a unique individual to want to be in that position, in that spotlight, carry that responsibility and that weight. And various people have different reasons for wanting to be in that position. I am choosing this because it is a part of who I am as a person to want to give and to be a part of community, progress, sharing my ideas, enjoying and appreciating other people's ideas. It's something that I find exhilarating. And my time here in Palm Springs, I first moved here in '98. I've seen it change over time. I've seen it where it's been very sad to see the state of the city, and now I see it, and it's just so impressive and so much to be proud of. And I would really like to continue to be a part of the community as I have been in the capacity of empowering and fulfilling our community's vision.
Well, let's, before we get into what your vision is for the city and what you'd like to do as taking over the chair of mayor, let's start at the beginning. Where were you born?
I was born in Little Italy in New York.
Okay.
A part of Little Italy, which is now Soho. I was born at home, actually, with a midwife, with a big Italian guy named Ron Catalano. I grew up in a place that is incredibly diverse. I was born in Manhattan. I went to elementary school in Queens, and then I moved into my great-grandmother's house in Long Beach, Long Island. And I went to junior high and half of high school there, and then I lived in upstate New York for a year, and then I moved to Palm Springs when I was 19, in 1998. That whole education of New York, the diversity, the exchange of ideas, the family that I come from, politically minded, liberal, democratic, progressive people who shared with me their vision for a very humanist and a very compassionate society that they envisioned to live in, and that they felt compelled to create in their lives. That's kind of where I come from.
And what did your parents do for a living?
Well, eclectic in a way. You know, they worked to live, I guess, if that's the right. My father, when I was born, my father was driving taxi cabs, and my mom was a secretary on Wall Street, an executive secretary. And then my father was driving trucks. And then he went into real estate a bit, and then he went into mortgage lending. And my mom kind of stayed doing executive secretary work. And then, my father and my mother have both had quite an evolution in their understanding of themselves and what they want to do, and always trying to get better at doing what is close to their hearts. Very intelligent people, aware, educated, curious, interested, but also a little rebellious. My father came back from Vietnam, could have gotten a job as an executive in an insurance company that my grandfather ran, rejected that life, started meditating, and drove a taxi cab, and then he met my mom. My mom's father was a professional sound engineer. He mic'd the Beatles. He did the sound design for, I believe it was Lincoln Center, but also kind of, They were on a bit of a spiritual path, self-discovery path. So for me, it was actually, I think, a very useful mix of intentions and ideologies and practices.
All right. And you came out here at 19. Had you gone on to any kind of secondary schooling before you moved out, or was college a thing that happened later?
It's kind of, always been there a bit. When I finished high school, I went to radio broadcasting school, actually, the New School of Radio and Television in Albany, New York. And I got a certification in radio production. And I worked in radio for a bit, but mostly in promotions. I wore a blue gorilla jumpsuit and would go to bars and throw cash in the air. I was actually right out of school, I was offered an overnight jockeying position in Boston, which is, an opportunity of a lifetime. You're 19
Sure.
years old. And I was too afraid to do it, to go there on my own. And ended up working as a certified nursing aide for maybe 6 months, and then decided I was coming to California.
And so you make the move out here to California. At that time, I know you're living in, is it your great-grandmother's house that you live in out here?
I do. So my great-grandmother bought a house here in the 60s. It's one of the oldest houses in Palm Springs. It was built in 39. And my mother came out a year before, and I came out a year later. My great-grandmother, she owned property actually around the Coachella Valley and in Los Angeles. Our house, what we have now, is what remains from that. She was an artist. She had art classes there at the house, and kind of a lot of artists in my family on both sides.
We're talking with Michael Birnberg, who is running for mayor in the city of Palm Springs in our series of candidates that we're discussing who they are and where they come from. Okay, so you move out here to Palm Springs at 19 years old. And what did you do when you got out here, and how did you wind up to the point where you are today running for mayor? Take us on that journey.
Boy, that journey.
You got a couple of minutes to take
right.
a 10, 12-year journey.
Seeking my passion, I worked in television production out here for a company called Hersey Lovegren Productions. I worked in restaurants. I ended up doing some construction. I also went to COD. If you fast forward, I went and lived in Malibu for a year. I lived in Berkeley for a year, and finally finished my community college and then transferred to UC Riverside. And then I lived in Riverside for 2 years and finished my bachelor's there. Came back to Palm Springs. And then I decided that I wanted to, because I had had an eclectic life of really experimenting with so many different things, which has been fulfilling but also challenging. I decided I wanted to have a foundation, and a good foundation for me, if I was going to raise a family and had a career, would be to be in a profession where I was giving. I was thinking about being an attorney, and I thought, well, I could be a psychologist and work with people and give and help, and that might be less rewarding financially, but it would be more rewarding, in my heart. So I decided to go do my master's in that. What I discovered, though, is I do enjoy that, working with individuals. What I really enjoy is larger issues, solving larger issues, big picture kind of issues for human beings, for society, whether it be organizational or individual, relational. Those things are what really stimulate me and where I feel much more of a passion for investment of my time and energy.
How well do you think a degree and a master's in psychology and counseling would serve you running a city?
Well, the city runs itself in some way. We have a city staff which is well paid, is experienced. They are there to run the city day to day. What I think the original intent of an elected official, an elected person from the community, is that that person represents the issues that the community cares about. The person represents the interest of the community and is there to guide in principle and in practice, to be a literal translation of the thirst and the hunger that exists in the community, and to utilize the full-time employees of a city staff, of a city organization, to carry those out. To what end? To the end of a democratic, collective decision-making process, but the person has to be there every day in order to make sure those things get done. And there are some very important things about a person's character, about a person's perspective on life that are underappreciated, or at least, we give it a lot of lip service, but at the end of the day, we don't realize how important those things are. I do have experience working with teams. I've done some mobile app development. I've worked with teams of professionals and different departments, and collaborating to bring a product. This was something I did in Mexico City for 2 years. I do have a really good, my education being eclectic, having traveled, having done different professions, actually does give me a really good insight into where different departments, where different interests, where different personalities are coming from. And I think that combined with the fact that I'm not really in a bubble here in Palm Springs, I actually am literally in touch with, personally, many of the different groups and communities that exist in Palm Springs. I have that kind of quality, I think, that differentiates me from other people running for office who have personal ambition to satisfy, have constituents that they feel aligned with. I actually am the diverse person that that everyone knows me as.
All right. Well, we will get into that a little deeper, and after we come back from the break, we're talking with Michael Birnberg, who is running for the mayor of Palm Springs. We'll talk about some of the issues that are on his agenda, as listed on his website, which, if you'd like to visit, is michaelbirnberg.com. That's spelled MichaelBirnberg.com, michaelbirnberg.com. And you're listening to K News Saturday Morning on K News 94.3 and 94.3knews.com.